When I started this series, I did not expect to get as in-depth or go on as long as I ultimately did. What can I say? I really love Mega Man X. Seriously, these are some of the longest scripts I've ever done for anything. But I don't regret it, having given myself an exercise to relive some of my favorite games of all time. But today, we're going to branch out into the last core X games and his many various cameos and Easter eggs. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 3, I strongly recommend you watch those first for background on these characters, because I'm moving on whether you have or not. First, we touch briefly on the Game Boy Color games, Mega Man Xtreme and Xtreme 2. And I mean briefly, the first game is essentially a sort of remake of X1 and X2 put together, but shorter, worse, and none of the characters or plot points matter. Wait, one kind of does. The idea is X is accessing a mother computer at the Maverick Hunter base, while Zero operates outside the confines of it to support him. And then you must assist MIDI and Techno, more music puns, against Camille and Sigma. What do we take away from this? Not much, except that they recycle this plot line for Mega Man X Dive as a basic concept for the game, so there's that, I guess. Alright, moving on. Xtreme 2, where the story actually matters. On an island far to the south, Reploids are just dropping dead, or dropping and ceasing function, maybe? I'm not sure the nomenclature on this one. More to the point, the event is a big enough mystery that X and Zero are sent in to investigate, with X4 casualty Iris acting as operator for the sake of the game. Continuity! The game is a sort of remake of X1, 2, and 3, though super compressed. You play through each hunter's respective 4 levels or entering the final leg of the game, but you can then swap between them freely before a New Game Plus mode allows you to go to the other character's story branch and completely power them up too. Lastly, the Xtreme mode then allows the story's true resolution. We learned over the course of the game that the events are being caused by a woman who looks like an estranged witch and her knight-in-waiting, Arcana and Gareth, respectively. Then we learned to use the power of the phenomenon called Erasure, referenced again in Mega Man X6, to delete Reploids of their identities and steal their DNA to power themselves up. After beating both X and Zero stories, and then the Extreme mode, we learned that Arcana was put up to this task by Sigma, because of course she was. And when X and Zero defeat him, the stolen DNA souls are returned to their proper bodies, and peace resumes once more. Kind of strange that this game actually ends up being kind of hugely plot pivotal, and yet nobody seems to remember this game exists. Life's a funny thing like that, I guess. Next up would be Mega Man X Maverick Hunter, but seeing as this game is not canon with everything that we've discussed up till now, as it was supposed to be a hard reboot of the first 6 games of the series, but went nowhere, likely because they put it on the PSP of all things, there's really no need to dive too deep into it. The only thing I find interesting is that the Mavericks get some dialogue that shows a little bit more personality, but nothing outside the likes of which we probably could have guessed. The only one I find compelling here is Storm Eagle, who hesitates and seems to have deep regrets about fighting X in particular, begging his forgiveness, which I found that interesting at least. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm not touching the Zero or ZX games. I really don't like those series, so sorry about that. Before I forget, I took so long to write this script that Mega Man X Dive came out, and it's good, I mean for a mobile game. I'd rather play it with a controller, and there's essentially no real story, except that Mega Man related data is all jumbled a la Xtreme 2. It has a lot of playable characters, including things like Mega Man Volnut with sunglasses on, so that's pretty comical. And while the scripting is rough, it gets the job done. I've actually accumulated a solid roster of characters and weapons without dropping a cent on it. Helps somewhat that my favorite characters are A ranks and not S ranks, but yeah, that's all I got. If you like Mega Man X, you'll probably like it too. Alright, next up, let's talk about cameos. In other Mega Man games, these include Black Zero shows up in a poster in Mega Man Legends 2 where he's described as being some kind of comic book hero. Regular Zero shows up in Mega Man Battle Network 3 White version in Higsby's Chip Shop on a poster. Zero.exe also shows up in the GameCube spin-off Network Transmission as a special boss encounter, and several Battle Network games include the Z-Saber chip as a very strong sword chip. Next, in the vs. Capcom series, Zero shows up in several of the vs. Capcom games, including Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Onimusha Blade Warriors, in his Mega Man Zero form at least, and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. In his end screen of the latter, X, Alia, and Axel cameo as well. X, meanwhile, would first be playable as an alternate costume for Zero in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. However, X would also become fully playable in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and be a major influence throughout the story campaign, being the one who is tasked with ultimately finishing off Ultron Sigma when the other heroes grant him the use of the 6 Infinity Stones to end the campaign's story mode. Also, X and Zero show up in every single SNK vs. Capcom trading card video game, And Axel also gets one in the latest one of the series, Card Fighters DS. Project Cross Zone 1 and 2. X and Zero, along with some other Mega Universe cameos, show up in both games and have an amusing little bit when they see a world full of spikes and react accordingly. Enough said, really. Teppen. X and Zero are fully playable heroes in this crossover card battler game, X being a green hero and Zero being a purple hero. There, alongside tons and tons of lesser enemies, Maverick's characters, and other references, appears a number of playable cards across the game's many expansions. Super Smash Bros. Series. X appears alongside several other incarnations of Mega Man in Mega Man Classic's Final Smash Attack in the most recent 2 Smash Bros. Titles. X and Zero also show up as some of the game's many collectible trophies, which erroneously call X a Reploid. Zero also shows up as both an assist trophy and as a costume for a Mii fighter swordsman. Ruby Spears' Mega Man cartoon. A kind of off-model X appears in a late series episode alongside the very on-model Vile and Spark Mandrill. In this version, X is a bit more destructive and careless concerning collateral damage, being almost single-minded in hunting the Mavericks. However, he mellows out a bit after teaming up with classic Mega Man. Dead Rising. Frank can get a costume based on X's basic form, which also shows up in his fighting game appearances, the super move Real Mega Buster being modeled off of X's Charge Shot. In Dead Rising 3, after clearing the game once, you can unlock the X1 armor, which gives you the most powerful attacks in the game. Lost Planet, Extreme Condition. The same X costume as Dead Rising is available in this game as well. Foxtrot comic strip. A character dresses as Mega Man X for a Halloween party in this particular strip shown on screen. Archie Comics. A lot, actually. My personal favorite being the Worlds Unite event, where he gets teamed up with Styx the Badger of all people, like it was specifically written for me or something. Alright, that wraps up everything I could find in terms of cameos, so let's do the final touches and review the heroes one last time. X. A hero whose primary quality is that he is the good guy. And I don't mean that in a broad or general sense. X has a big heart, and he worries constantly for the sake of others. But this worrying also makes him brave in the face of challenges, toppling enemies who tower over him, and even over the very building in which he is facing them in. He believes in pacifism as an ideal, but accepts the harsh reality, rarely making things so simple. He really only breaks from this over the course of Mega Man X7, but let's not revisit that, shall we? He's the ideal warrior who truly fights for justice and peace, all the while knowing that those who wish most for peace are the ones who are preparing for the war. Zero. The jaded hero who still has his heart in the right place after suffering innumerable slings and arrows. He's lost loved ones, former friends, and risks his life nonetheless, knowing it could happen again, because to not act is to endanger them far more. He doesn't tolerate Mavericks trying to question his allegiance or his goals. He does his mission because there's no other cause for him. He's a sort who's paid his dues several times over, but he doesn't lose his cool for having done so. That's why he's the perfect foil to X and the best to have at his friend's back. Axel. Axel has yet to prove himself in the eyes of many fans, but to me I think he's come a long way in a very short time, particularly with his characterization as we saw it in Command Mission in X8. He's young and cocky, but he brings unique talents to the party and understands he hasn't seen it all yet, but being paired with X and Zero really helps characterize him. And since his injuries at the end of X8 are one of the biggest cliffhangers in Capcom's history, I definitely want to see where he grows from here. Sigma and Lumine. Sigma's precise goals didn't crystallize until much later into the franchise, with his general goals being more a militaristic conquest until the series was almost out. Later on, he seemed to become obsessed with forced evolution, with Reploids eventually exceeding humankind in such a way that humans themselves would fall and perish in the wake of Reploids achieving their next level. What this exactly means is kind of a huge question mark, likely obscured behind the lens of madness that Sigma sees the world through. Lumine is almost the opposite, being calm, collected, and in control the entire time as his plans fell into place. In some ways, it makes him more unnerving, being small in stature and always composed right until the last second. When he enters his Paradise Lost form, it's genuinely unsettling, and the fact that you're on a timer to break through his defenses and administer a killing blow makes the entire thing increasingly stressful. If there is an X9, it would be appropriate to see him again as a new mastermind, greater than even Sigma himself in the Mavericks hierarchy. And that brings us to the series taken as a whole. It's a series that started with simple origins, just platforming and shooting robots. But the stories eventually came to be more robust, and with that, the understanding of the characters and the worlds around them. It solidified itself forever as one of my favorite series, and I would love to see it continue onward from there. And I think that that's the final word on this series after all this time. So what did you guys at home think? Did you like this retrospective, story-based look at a game series? Would you want to see more like this in the future? If you do, hit the like button and leave a comment with some of your ideas down below. And thanks for listening to this little Snek overthinking one of his favorite series from start to finish. Who knows what we'll cover next? Well, I'll tell you this, I'll see you there.